Gloria S. I'm Gloria, an alcoholic. And I might as well sit down right now. Bill says, watch my resentments and my language. Let's get the resentment out of the way first. I promised some gals that I would mention last Friday night's meeting. The group of us gals got to attend a men's stag meeting. You know, that sounds kind of silly, it sounds kind of flip, but the point I'm trying to make is that, we're all sick alcoholics, and we all have a long ways to go, including you men. But we do have something to share. We're all sober alcoholics today. So ladies, if that's enough about that, we'll get on with the rest of this. Unless you want me to say some more. Say some more, huh? I don't know. I don't get resentments today. I give them. Did I straighten you out, Bill? Do you stand corrected? Okay. Takes care of that. And as far as Jim's concerned, he told me to keep it spiritual, and I can't guarantee you that either. I doubt very much if I will start out spiritual. But by the time I sit down, you'll see a halo. Now, you said you were leaving at 7:30. You can leave right now if you want to. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing up here. I don't know what I'm going to say. Some people asked me this morning, aren't you nervous? And I says, not yet. So when I get out of that chair and start up there and all you goofballs start making a lot of noise and whistling and clapping and having a ball, that makes me nervous. The old shot of adrenaline goes straight to the heart. And I don't need it. The heart's pumping fine. I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about where I came from and what brought me to you and what I'm trying to do in my life today with God's help in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I don't know what I'm going to say. I have one story only. My perception of my story changes. The way I see the way things were changes daily. I can look back and see my family in a different perspective today than I saw them 6 years ago when I came in, or 10 years ago, or 11 years ago when I first stumbled in here. And when I came in, I had a lot of anger towards my family. They were just a bunch of people who did not care much about their daughter. That's the way I thought it was. It may be true, but it's not the way I choose to believe today. I had 3 brothers. I was born in San Jose, California. And by the way, New Love, the place I'm from today, is behind Bob's Big Boy. Thought we'd clear that up. I spent a few years in San Jose. I was born at Admission Day. I always thought the parade they had down First Street was for me. And I always said I was admitted to the Union. I wasn't born. So I kind of wanted to be unique from the very beginning, right? I spent a lot of time in San Jose, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, and a few years in Redwood City. And raised a lot of hell in San Mateo, San Francisco, and San Jose. It's not really important what my childhood was like, but basically just so I can qualify a little bit as a screwed up kid. I thought I was Daddy's little girl till I was about 11 years old. And Daddy got a speeding ticket and got pissed off at me. Excuse the language, Bill. My father got angry with me, and he's a very verbal man. And I got the impression that day that I was no longer Daddy's little girl. And so I pulled away from him, is the way I see it today. You know, I don't believe today that he pulled away from me. I believe I pulled away from him, because it's my reaction to what happened. And probably from that point on, I started looking for men to have that relationship with. I picked up a resentment against an older brother about that time, and I spent the next 32 years building a case against him. And I built a good case, real good case. I have one brother that's 15 months older than I am. I had a brother 6.5 years younger than I am, and I also have another brother who's 18 years younger than I am. He's 7 months older than my son, which is really spread out, isn't it? I don't think my dad blamed the milkman, but it probably came close to that, because he worked out of town all my life. Always a couple of 200-300 miles away from home, and he'd come home maybe once or twice a month. And then it was screaming, fighting, hollering because we didn't clean up the backyard, because we didn't cut the weeds, because we didn't clean the windows, because we didn't do this, because we didn't do that. And in my teen years, I found out that if I was working and I had my own money, I could escape to some place else when he came home for his weekends, which caused a lot of problems, because he would still call up the cops and say, "Go pick up my daughter, she run away from home." They did pick me up one night when I was out riding around. I shouldn't have been. And they told me they had to take me home. And I says, "Well, if you wait 1 hour, my dad will be in his truck and on down the road going back to work." And they said, "No, we can't do that." And I says, "Well," I says, "I can tell you what's going to happen." I says, "But I really would suggest that you and I sit out here in front and wait until we see that green pickup take off." He says, "No, Gloria, we can't do that." And I said, "Okay." So we walked in, and I walked in first, which was a mistake from the get-go. My dad had this old a rocking chair, and he loved to have women sit in it that had dresses on, because the minute they sit down and lean back, the chair would go over. He's weird. So I walked in, and this chair was right behind me after I walked in the door, and he hauled off and swung, and I hit the chair and went, psh. And the cop was standing there, and he says, "Gloria," he says, "I think we made a mistake. Let's go outside." No shit. So we went outside, and that was typical. That was typical of the times my dad would come home and I would take off. And you know, I quit school when I was 16. I say I quit. Now, if you want the truth, the dean of girls called me in and she said, "Gloria, you either quit or we're going to kick you out." So I quit. Sort of. I left there and I went to a Burroughs bookkeeping machine school up in San Francisco. Now that's an education. It's a real education, walking up Market Street every day for 6 months. And for some sick reason, I liked it. You know, I really enjoyed seeing the winos sitting up against the fence with a bottle of wine between their legs, guarding it with their life. You know, and to me that was an alcoholic. I had an aunt who lived in a sick marriage for a number of years, was alcoholic. She was a bad alcoholic, you know. She was somebody that I probably would never get as bad as. She went into convulsions, DTs, hospitalization, comas. She would get out in her crazy Indian sick so-and-so, still don't like the man, would pick her up and take her home, and it's one of those relationships where he would beat her or whatever it took to get her to drink again. And that was the kind of relationship I thought the woman alcoholic was usually involved in. I had heard from the time I was a youngster that my uncle had found this A&A thing that sobered him up. And he was still sober. All this time he was still sober. I don't know. You know, there was a lot of drinking around my family, but not so much in my home. Once in a blue moon, my folks would have a party, or some people would come over, and my mother would get wiped out, and she'd cry. She cried a lot when she was drinking. I mean, she was one of the, I really thought I was embarrassed. You know, I was really embarrassed because this woman would have a few drinks, and she'd get her feelings hurt, and she'd start bawling. You know, and it seemed like my dad liked to stick the little knives in and get her in that condition. I don't know. That's their problem today. I don't know. My family is something that I don't often think about, but sometimes I'm forced to. My sister-in-law called me this morning and said they'd had another feud last night. And I said, was my dad drinking? And she says, yes. That's his problem. I had a younger brother, as I mentioned earlier, who, after we moved to Atascadero and my mother had this last son, he got into drugs. And he started out sniffing glue, you know, and that's no problem. We all know that sniffing glue can't hurt anybody. That's the way he started. He couldn't drink. You know, God knows we tried to teach him. I mean, we did. We stood in the kitchen and we literally tried to show him how to drink a straight shot and not throw up. And he couldn't handle that. He couldn't drink. So he turned to drugs, you know, and he got into the heavy-duty stuff, and he tried to quit. And, you know, and I was remembering this afternoon the time that he came to me, and he says, I haven't used for 3 days, sis. And he says, I'm really trying this time, you know, and I had absolutely no feelings for him at that moment because I knew it was just another smoke screen. I knew he wasn't going to make it, and I didn't have this program. You know, there's been times when I've said, why couldn't I have found this program sooner? You know, I wasn't meant to. You know, I was meant to get here when I did, not 1 minute sooner. But he, I don't know, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, he went to Guadalupe and picked up some dope and died. That's what it amounts to. He overdosed on pills of all sorts of kind and heroin. And he was 25 years old. You know, they kill. Alcohol kills. For 13 months after that, and I've skipped over a lot of the crap that went on back then, but it's really not that important today. You know, I had 13 months of chronic abusive drinking and taking all the pills I could get my hands on, and it was such a good excuse. Poor Gloria, she just lost her brother. You know, poor baby. God, did I milk that. I really milked it for all it was worth. And it took me a short 13 months to call Alcoholics Anonymous. I've learned in my sobriety that out of every seemingly tragic event comes something good. For me, the good was finding this program probably a lot sooner than I would have otherwise. You know, the good was the fact that I could not afford a fancy detoxification. You know, I couldn't afford to go to any of the resorts. You know, and that may sound a little bit, if it does, okay. I don't have any bad feelings towards alcohol and drug abuse hospitals. But I thank God that I couldn't get to one. Because I had to go through it at home, and I had to go through it the hard way. You know, I had to go through all the sickness and all the bad feelings and bad emotions and physical sickness in order to get here. Had it been one bit easier, I wouldn't be here. Or one bit harder. I came in here on October 19th. This is going to be a short pitch, Jim. Came here October 19th, 1973. And I came in wearing my sunglasses and sitting where Karen's sitting. And they would call on me. And this is at night, folks. Night meetings, right? Sunglasses over there. They would call on me, and I'd say, I'm Gloria, I'm an alcoholic, I'll pass. The first year I was around here, I did exactly that. I never shared. I was afraid to. You know, God knows I didn't want you to know what I was like. You know, and He also knows that I couldn't have handled you getting too close to me at the time. I'd dry out a little bit and then the depressions would set in. And I was hanging around with some slippers and sliders because I thought, Jesus, you know, they always say stick with the winners, and I thought, well, what about these poor slobs? They need a friend too. You're right, I was the poor slob. Some are sicker than others. But anyway, this dear friend of mine, you know, that was really helping me, suggested I go up to mental health and they have a good doctor up there that could help me with these depressions. And so I thought, well, I'm only, you know, staying away from the booze maybe 3 months at a time. Maybe if I go up there, I can stay away a little bit longer. Or if I do drink, I won't get as drunk. Control it. So I went up there, and this good doctor gave me what he thought I needed, and naturally I had a lot of symptoms that he didn't know about. And then I also told him about some that I didn't really have. And I walked away with my pills, my prescriptions, prescription drugs, legal, from all 3 doctors. They were. I got really hooked on Valium. You know, really hooked on the stuff. You know, until after I came back the last time and really got sober and got off all the drugs too, I didn't know that I didn't require an afternoon nap. You know, that's the truth. I always thought that I was the type of person that needed a nap in the afternoon. But if you're taking 10 or 12 Valium a day, you do need a nap. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't get this program. You know, I couldn't quite comprehend what was being said at the meetings. And I've learned since then that you have to be awake and alert and stuff like that. And Valium doesn't allow me to be that way. I guess the only thing I did right since 1973 was come back to meetings. No matter what I was doing out there, I kept coming back to meetings. No matter how many resentments I had or hatreds I thought I had or what, yeah, you know I'm talking about you again. The one thing I did keep doing right was coming back to meetings. There was nothing out there. There was no place out there for me to go. There was nobody out there that was going to help me. And I knew that. Even while I was screwing up, I knew there was nothing out there that was going to help me. Down deep somewhere, I knew that right here was the only place, if there ever was going to be any hope for me, it was going to be here. And I knew that. I was around here for about a year, doing my little anonymous bit over there, and going out 2 or 3 months drinking, going out 2 or 3 months drinking, and taking the pills, and some of this garbage was leaking into my mind and really screwing up my head. And I got a compulsion to die one night. You know, and I call it a compulsion because if you're an alcoholic, you know what the compulsion to drink is. And you know when that compulsion hits and you really don't have any program, and you know that no matter what, you are going to drink. You know, and I knew that night that no matter what, I knew I wanted to die. I had to die. It was like when I came in here and I was drinking, and I knew if I quit drinking I was going to die, and I knew it. I knew if I kept drinking I was going to die. Well, this one particular night after getting loaded and throwing up and getting loaded again, I was in a bar downtown. You know, I remember this just as clear as if it was yesterday. I was in a bar downtown, and there was this little gal, little old lady, sitting down at the end of the bar. And she asked the bartender for a drink. And I guess she was in there quite often, and they really didn't have much use for her. And they didn't have any respect for her at all. You know, and they made little remarks, you know, and I got to thinking while I was sitting there, I said to myself, you know, Gloria, this AA is not working for you. And you're going to end up just like that little old lady sitting down at the end of the bar. You know, you're going to be 60 years old, you're going to be sitting at the end of the bar, and nobody's going to have any respect for you either. You know, you're going to be worth nothing. And I left there knowing that I wanted to die that night, that I had to die that night because I didn't have any choice. Because I couldn't make it in here. You know, I used the first part of how it works to cop out. You know, the emotionally incapable. I copped out with that. You know, I qualified myself as one of those. So I went and I got my gun. You know, and I took my gun and I took a ride and I pulled the trigger. And so help me God, as I stand here today, I wanted to die. I really wanted to die. There was a lot of sick reasons as to why I aimed the gun where I did, and I'm not going to go into them tonight. It's not important. But what is important is that God took the steering wheel and hit the end of that gun, and it went in an opposite direction. It still hit me. And I got news for anybody here who wants to die with a gun. Aim it at the head, man. It doesn't hurt as much. You know, just do it upright. If you don't want to stay sober, do it upright. Because that night I did it the hard way. You know, and one more time God said, no, Gloria, I don't want you. Not the way you are. I've got nothing up here for you the way you are today. So go back there. Go back there to that program. Give them one more chance to help you. And I rode around for a week after that, and it's the longest period since 1973 that I did not attend a meeting at least every other day, even when I was drinking and using. And I rode around. I rode back and forth out that road where those great big 18-wheelers were riding back and forth, and I kept telling myself, which one? Which one? And I kept hearing people talking, and there was nobody there. Totally, totally insane. You know, I have no problem with that second step. None whatsoever. I came back here and I decided to give you guys one more chance to fix me. And I started listening. And there was an old gal, and I'll mention this for Eddie's sake, there was an old gal named Betty Ward up in Napomo. And we'd been around here for a while, and I had about 6 months that time. I was afraid to drink. And if you're new to this program, let me clue you in on something. Fear will not keep you sober. It will not keep you sober. But I was afraid to drink, so I stayed dry for 6 months. And then at the time, there was a bunch of us sickos trying to change these old goats, and we had a steering committee meeting one afternoon that blew the roof off this place. And I damn near cleaned Dave Jones's clock, physically, and I left here with a bag of resentments. And this old gal, Betty Ward, got a group of us resentments and started a meeting in Napomo. And that went on for a few years, and we had a pretty good group going. And about 2 years later, I came back. I had gotten a year and 8 months sober and had one drink because I had to. I had no program. I didn't have any choice. I had one drink, but I was still afraid to get drunk, so I had one drink with the right hand and poured the bottle out with the left. Then I spent the next 5 hours convincing myself that these old goats down here didn't know what they were talking about. If I had one drink, I did not have to get drunk. That was a miserable 5 hours. I did not get drunk. I got a year and 6 months, year and 4 months. Just for the record, I've had 4 one-year anniversaries in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're slipping and sliding, keep coming back. Keep coming back, no matter what. Anyway, about 2 years after leaving this group, I came back, and I was sitting over there against the wall. It was a Sunday night meeting just like this one. And I thought, Jesus, I'm just going to sit here and pretend like nothing's going on. Try to relax. And damned if they didn't ask my number one resentment to read. This old Betty Ward, she had told us gals, if you have a resentment against somebody, pray for the son of a bitch. Won't do him any good, but pray for him anyway. So this person, who shall remain nameless, got up to read, and I'm finally going to tell you what I prayed, Bill. I said, please, God, trip the son of a bitch. But you know what I discovered that night was that, number one, he didn't trip, okay? But God understands when I'm praying, he doesn't care what words I use. And he knows what's in my heart and what I need. So he doesn't care what the words are. I've discovered that the hard way. But he didn't trip Bill that night, and there's been times when I've been kind of sorry about that, but that's okay. What I did realize, seriously, though, was that after the meeting was over, I was able to walk up to him and shake his hand. And I didn't hate him, and I didn't resent him anymore. That blew me away. I didn't know that was going to happen. I had not intended for that to happen. But that's the way this program works for me. My very, very best thinking can screw it up, but if I just relax and attempt to work my program, things seem to work out just fine. So after screwing around for the next few years in this program, I came back on March 1st, 1979, with a belief that alcohol was no longer going to work for me in any way, shape, or form. Every time I had drank before, I had blacked out and passed out. That's always the way it was from the time I was 14 years old. I drink, I black out, and pass out. That was my escape. That night, prior to March 1st, I went out and I drank, and I drank, and I drank, and I could not drink enough fast enough to get down here by 8 o'clock. What I also discovered that night was that alcohol no longer did the job. It didn't work. I didn't black out, I didn't pass out. As hard as I tried, I couldn't black out and pass out. So I came back on March 1st and I talked. Oh, let me back up just a second. When I went out on that drunk, I had heard prior to that, weak here, and all this garbage, and all the times I had drank, nobody ever came knocking on my door wanting to know how I was, and self-pity royal. But when I went out and drank that night, and I ended up at one of our local resort hotels downtown, and there was somebody who was my employer to begin with, but also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was very well known in town. He was on a number of political yucky yucks, president of this, president of that, and I really thought he was important in the community. When I came down the stairs of that hotel the next morning, it was broad daylight, it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and in comes this guy in his suit and white shirt and tie into this flop house to see this drunk, to find out if I was okay. He told me he cared. He showed me he cared. And I believed him. He also told me that if he could have caught me that night, if he didn't have to babysit with his daughter, he'd have drugged me off the bar stool and we'd have had the damnedest fight you ever saw in Santa Maria. I believed him. It's about that tall. Got a booming voice. When he was mad, you knew it. The whole town knew it. But I had a lot of respect for the man. I asked him to be my sponsor. because I figured I'd tried everything else Gloria's way. It's about time I got somebody that was a little bit stronger and tougher than I was, than I thought I was. So I did ask him to be my sponsor, and by the way, I do not recommend that a woman get a man sponsor, nor do I recommend that a man get a woman for a sponsor, with the exception of Anne, but she's got her hands full. I had a lot of trouble reading when I first came into the program. When I was taking the volume, you couldn't see the words, but then after I quit taking that, I kept reading the white print. And I couldn't read the black print. And I kept trying to confuse things in my own mind, and I had a real hard time understanding what the big book was telling me and what the steps meant. And this man spent a lot of time with me, almost reading to me. If I couldn't understand something, I could go to him and he would sit there and explain it to me. He would listen to me at meetings, and if I said something that made him think I was going off in the wrong direction, he'd nail me to the wall after the meeting. And that's exactly what I needed. I needed somebody that cared enough about me to spend a little time with me and help me learn to be willing to work the program. And it hasn't been a piece of cake. Life is not easy for me, always. We got started on the steps. I learned that I was powerless over alcohol, pills, other people's alcoholism, and a lot of things, and that my life has become unmanageable, had become unmanageable. What I believe today is that my life is unmanageable by me, 100% of the time. What I've also learned is that if I ask for God's help in my daily life, He'll give it to me. I believe God's got 4 answers for Gloria. Yes, no, wait, and if you insist. I don't insist anymore. I just don't insist. When He says wait, I'm not too pleased. When He says no, I can accept it better. I'm not real strong in patience or tolerance. A little better today than I was yesterday. I had an interesting day yesterday. I haven't made too many enemies in the last 24 hours. Unfortunately, I guess I made one Friday night, because he decided that after having his party and his booze, that he didn't like the note I left on his door saying, "Please don't park your car in front of my carport, thank you." So he stuck a knife in my tire. Now that wasn't quite so bad. I said a few things, and that wasn't quite so bad. Then I get in the trunk of my car to get my spare out, and the damn thing's the wrong size. So then I went down to some yahoo and tried to get some money for it and get a tire. Anyway, that got squared away. I don't have a spare, but it's okay. But I was talking this morning at the meeting, if this had been a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever. Yesterday afternoon, I've probably been shopping for a gun. I've probably been sitting in my car nightly waiting for these creeps to come back with a bottle, freezing, and they probably would have never came back to the same car anyway. But that was my attitude then. You don't get mad, you get even. You fix them. You fix them. There's still times when I want to fix them, and I don't do it. I don't do it for one basic reason. I'm very comfortable in my sobriety today, and I don't want to jeopardize that. Nobody or anything is worth being uncomfortable in sobriety over. I may not like what I see you doing on the outside, but it's none of my business. It's not up to me to fix you. It's only up to me to work my program. And I told you I have no problem with step 2. When I took step 1, and he's going to go and turn on this one, but When I came back in 79, I took those first 3 steps to the best of my ability, all 3 of them, because I had no problem with that first, second, or third step, I thought. My sponsor helped me get into my inventory. You know, I had a resentment against him for a while because he took his first and he came in after I did. And I thought, how dare you be so eager and look so good in such less time? But some are sicker than others. So I got into my inventory, and I got into the 4th and 5th step, and I did my first inventories down in Redlands at a retreat house down there, and old Father Don, an old priest that talks about losing his keys a lot and crawling through the nuns' windows, and a neat old man. I had a lot of problems with my religious upbringing. You know, when you're surrounded by chronic alcoholics that are abusing and fighting and being hospitalized and getting bloody and stuff like that, and then you're forced to go to catechism in an old dirt floor garage, and when it's raining outside, you stand up, kneel down, and all this crap, and if you don't, you get it with a ruler, and then for a short period of time, when I was 15 years old, I was in they called it a boarding school, you know, but you couldn't get out. It was up in South San Francisco, and I learned a lot up there. I learned a lot about how you can drink codeine and get loaded and float. Have you ever floated? I swear to this day I did not touch 1 step on 4 flights of stairs. Didn't touch them. Didn't touch them. Those were a lot of the things that came out in my 4th and 5th step. And a lot of the things that you push back and you say, oh, that's not important. Why write it down? They're all important. I had a lot of problems trying to figure out what the book wanted me to do as far as the 4th step was concerned, and I couldn't understand it. And my sponsor suggested to me that, Gloria, you just sit down and write, block it off in time spans, and block it off and write. And you don't put blame in it. You don't blame yourself, and you don't blame others. And that's what I did. The first one was a garbage dump. You know, it was strictly a garbage dump. I got rid of the big garbage that was getting me drunk all the time. The second time was after I had a couple of operations, and God saw fit to give me the time and the space to do a more thorough inventory. And in that one I did. I started back as far back as I could remember. I wrote down the incident, my reaction, and what I brought away from it with. You know, what feelings I came away from it with. That worked quite well. There's very, very seldom now where something will come up that I did not cover. For some reason, taking it the way I did covered all bases. I said I came away from my childhood with a resentment against my brother, and I did. And I told you I built that for 32 years, and I did. It wasn't until last year that it got so painful that I knew I had to do something about it. So what I did was go to my sponsor, which was a mistake to begin with. No, it wasn't. I knew what she was going to do was give me the push I needed to go do what I had to do. And I went up and I made that amends. You know, and that knot I had in my gut was gone. You know, he's my brother and I love him. I don't have to like him now. You know, and it's kind of neat to know that today. We don't travel in the same circles. We don't feel about life the same. And we're just different kinds of people. You know, and it's neat to know that I can have someone like a brother or a parent or a child that I can love, but I don't have to like their actions. The name of that tune is I just don't react to them. That'll take care of those steps, won't it? Jim, you're late. Jim told me to keep this spiritual. But what really blew that was that Ann and Jim and I went to a retreat together a while back, and The only thing I can say is that we all left there a little more spiritual than we got there. I'm being generous. I might put a plug in for retreats to any of you alcoholics out there. I've discovered a lot of things in my sobriety. You know, I've discovered most of them in rooms like this. And the other share from my sponsors. But one of the things that's really gotten me closer to my higher power on a regular basis is being able to get away to a retreat, or there's a member here that likes to go up in the mountains and just be alone. But it's so important in my sobriety to get off someplace where I can listen to what God has to say to me. You know, I do a lot of talking, just plain talking. And there's times when I've got to just sit down and be quiet and listen. You know, smell the roses. Look at the blossoms on the trees. Just relax. Listen to the wind blow through the trees. You ever heard that? Ever had the wind just blow through the trees? You hear the leaves ruffling and rustling and whatever? That's a trip and a half. That's what I get out of retreats. So the only thing I can recommend to you is if you get an opportunity to go, go. Go. And plan on spending some time alone. And that's all I'll say about that. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory. When we're wrong, promptly admit it. I don't like to say I'm sorry. Just don't like it. So what I do on a daily basis is try real hard not to put myself in the position where I have to say I'm sorry. And step 11, that's where I do my retreats, you know. That's what I take to the retreats with me. Step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand Him. Praying only for the knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. What more can a drunk like me ask for than a loving God and a group of people like you who are patiently sitting there, even quiet tonight, listening? You know, some people came in and said something, one would say, can I touch the speaker? And, you know, somebody else said I wouldn't miss it, and I said, wasn't there a basketball game on tonight? And somebody else came in and said, gee, I thought if I got here this time I'd have room to sit down. And I said, well, I really thought you would tonight too. And it's neat for a drunk like me to come into a room where people know me and they still show up. You know, it's a miracle. It's a miracle for me to be alive today. And it's a miracle for me to be sober. Step 12. We had a neat experience with 12-step call last week. Last week. I don't think I'd be breaking our anonymity if I told you we had the same first name, same last initial. We're both Virgos. We both work for the same company. No wonder she didn't make it. You know what I realized, though, and it just made me feel so good, was that there was 8 or 9 women alcoholics in this valley that cared enough to spend a few hours out of their 24 hours with this sick woman. And there was a few years ago when we tried to do the same thing and we didn't have a handful of women that had time. You know, thank God we've got this program and we've got so many new people coming in and working their program and getting sober and finding out what the program's all about, that they can do that today. It's a trip and a half. Practice these principles in all my affairs. I could joke about affairs, but I won't. There'd probably be some smartass in the crowd saying something. I try to practice the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous in my life on a daily basis, each and every day of my life. It's not always easy, but nobody ever said it would be. If I ask God in the morning to help me stay sober for that day, to help me be the best child of His I can be that day, the best mother, daughter, sister, grandmother, employee, the very best person I can be that day, I usually have a pretty good day. And remind myself at night when I go to bed to thank Him. No matter what happens in my day, when I go to bed at night, I thank Him. Sometimes I say, thank you, damn it. But I always say thank you. Thank you for this day and all the lessons I've had today. Thank you for my sobriety. God bless the other alcoholics who have not yet found this program. God bless them. Because there's a lot of them out there. A lot of them. And you know they're not all going to make it. You know we're the minority? The people that are alcoholics sitting in this room tonight are the minority. But we can increase those odds by sticking out our hand when a newcomer comes in, whether it's a man or woman, fellas, and shake their hand and say, welcome. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I sit over in my serenity corner over there, and I'm too lazy to get out of the chair when a newcomer comes in. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. But we can increase the odds. We really can. By just being willing to get off our duffs and put ourselves out a little bit for the suffering alcoholic. I'd like to thank Jim someday for asking me to share. Maybe I will someday. When I get over the resentment of being asked second or third or fourth. That's okay. It keeps me humble. Keeps me humble. I realize today that I am not the sick, sorry, screaming, insane, welfare, mother alcoholic that I was for so many years. And I thank God for that. Every once in a while somebody will forget my name and they'll say, I gave somebody such and such to read. And I love it when they do that because you know what it tells me? Today I am somebody. I'm somebody today, damn it, and God, it feels good. Really feels good. I love all of you here tonight. I may not like what you're doing with your life on the outside, but I love each and every one of you. Thank you.